he would say to me, he's like, you know why I love this for you? And I said, why? And he's like, because I see how you light up when you talk about it. He's like, when we go and we sit and you have lunch and you talk about what you're making, he's like, I see the most excited version of my daughter I've ever seen. I see that little girl again, that was so excited to show me the things she just drew or just figured out.
Welcome back, ladies and gentlemen, to Cardboard and Beyond. I am your host, Bryce Platz, and today my guest is one of the most fervent Flesh and Blood fans out there. Besides that, she's won herself a handful of tailors, she's judged FAB cosplay competitions, and she's received personal cosplay appearance requests from the highest of the high at LSS. If you were to ask what -IE, Dyadic Carapace, Reality Refractor, and Kiss of Death all have in common, the answer would invariably come back. They were brought to life by Max Ferocity, aka Rachel Stoddard. Rachel, thanks so much for being here.
Yeah, of course. Thanks for having me.
Really excited to dive into everything cosplay because, let's get real, that's exactly what you're known for. But in Act 1, we would really like to get to know you outside of, and maybe a little bit inside of, all those crazy costumes. So first comes first, why card games? I guess for you, the better question is why Flesh and Blood? Because it is your first and only trading card game. Why the captivation?
Yeah, so I've always been a person that really enjoys like in-person gaming, tabletop gaming, but I hadn't really experienced, TCG gaming prior to Flesh and Blood. My husband had tried to teach me Magic, I think about a year into our marriage, and I didn't really catch on to it. I think it had maybe too high of a ceiling for me because it had been around so long with so many cards. But for me, what draws me in when I am checking out new games, like when I'm at gaming conventions, looking at new options, first and foremost for me is the visuals and the art. It has to spark something for me to approach it. And when I saw the box of Flesh and Blood on the table that he had brought home, which was, I believe, Arcane Rising at the time, one of the first things that I saw, besides the pretty, black and purple and the swirls and everything, was the packet with Dash on it. And that I picked up and I said, what is this? Can you show it to me? And he was really surprised because I didn't take two other TCGs he had tried to teach me in the past. And I think what really kept me engaged with Flesh and Blood was the concept of kind of owning your character, being a part of that. You're not throwing monsters or things across the table at each other. You're really enacting that hero and that embodying that hero when you're playing them. And I really like that concept. I'm a avid D&D player in the past, and building a character, bringing them to life is really exciting for me. So I think that's what really, I think, first drew me in, and then secondarily kept me there with Flesh and Blood.
What a great origin story. Let's talk about where you came from, Rachel, in the physical world. You've been in Illinois for a huge part of your life. You're kind of in and around the Chicago area, which just so happens to put you right next to one of the biggest LGSs in the game of Flesh and Blood, Min-Max Games. What a great place to call home. And so the question really is Chicago an inextricable part of who you are, or is it just where you live?
I don't think you can really separate the two most of the time. It's not just where I live. I have been here my whole life. I've never lived outside of the Chicagoland area. And, as much as when I was younger, I said, oh, I'm going to leave as soon as I can. I'm going to move across the country or even across the world. I never did end up leaving. And maybe that's just, it's such a comfortable place for me. And I think that Chicago it has its own vibe, the Chicagoland area and Chicago itself and the Midwest. I think it's just, I know everybody hears about Midwest friendly, but it's true. I think the community, like not just FAB, but just in general around the Chicago area and in the Midwest, is just very welcoming, very warm in general, and very strong community. So I guess you could say it is a part of me. And I don't know, I'm not saying I'll stay here my whole life, but I could definitely see staying here quite a bit longer until maybe I want to go on a big adventure somewhere else in the world. But for right now, Flesh and Blood has been taking me around the world with that, play the game, see the world mantra. And you mentioned Min-Max, and Min-Max is my home store. It's where I started playing Flesh and Blood, where I still play Flesh and Blood, and has just, one of the strongest communities around as far as players and camaraderie. So Yeah, you could say it's definitely a part of my life more so than just a place I live.
Rachel, you are also known for saying that you are best motivated by being told that you can't do that. Why do you think that is, and where does that come from for you?
I think first of all, maybe I'm just incredibly stubborn, so that could be a part of it, for better or for worse. Um, for me, I don't like being limited. I don't like people underestimating me because I probably underestimate myself the most. And so when somebody else does it, I'm like, well, hey, no, I get to underestimate myself. I can talk down to myself, not you. But I think for me, it's just proving people wrong is like some sort of trait within me that can be used positively sometimes. And so that's really what I like to harness. I also think there's a really positive aspect of that of I like to surprise people in a good way too. I've always been the person that loves,
Mm.
making special gifts for people or doing something they don't expect. And I think this kind of plays into that as well when I'm able to show up to an event with something that, people are like, what? Like, what did you just bring? I can't believe you made that. And so for me, it's being able to do something that, makes people stop and go, wow, that's something new. And I really enjoy that aspect of what I get to do. So yeah, part of it's stubbornness, but I think I try to harness it for the better, maybe.
It's something that is so noticeable in the way you spoil cards. There is a I can feel your anticipation and how much you are kind of prolonging the magic until that final flourish, the big moment, the big reveal.
Yeah, it's I think that's what I enjoy most about spoilers. Yes, it is an honor. It's exciting to be involved. That's an exciting part in and of itself. But for me, it's an opportunity to do something, something that really leads up to a storyline. So, I guess we're talking about like origin stories here. When I was growing up, the biggest thing that I wanted to do as a career someday was to actually like work at Disney World as like an Imagineer or maybe working in character creation. I always liked to have this idea of bringing happiness to people, bringing joy. Um, and so I never did get to do that. My
Mm.
day to day is very, very far away from, what my childhood dreams were. But being able to do things like these spoilers where I'm getting to tell a story, weave something leading up to the card drop, that really takes me back to that girl growing up, that wanted to go out there and to do something special and make people smile and make them feel immersed in what they're experiencing or the things they love. So for me, I love kind of dragging out the suspense, which is perfect for this upcoming set. Um, and really just take people down a path of it's not just I'm not going to just drop a card on my day. Not that there's anything wrong with that, but I want you to feel like, you got something more out of it than just, here's the card. I'm excited about it. I want you to feel like, there's a scene that goes with that. There's something, really bringing a part of that larger story to life.
Back to your supreme motivation. Do you feel was there someone in your life that consistently doubted you? Do you think that's where the roots of that motivational strategy come from, or is it something you've adopted along the way?
I think so. I'll say my family's always been really supportive. They were always the ones cheering me on, my whole life and telling me you can do what you put your mind to, you can be creative. I think for me, it was I always doubted myself. I'm a very self-doubting person.
Mm.
I tend to be a little way too self-negative actually. And so for me, it's almost like I'm overcoming myself in a way. I guess we're getting all psychological here, but if I had to psychoanalyze myself in a way here, I'd say that it was more so, you know, I always doubt myself. I tell myself I can't do something. I used to when I was younger, like give up before I
Mm.
even really tried on a lot of things. And as I got older, it was, yeah, there's going to be people out there that doubt you externally, but I also know I doubt myself and I want to overcome that. I don't just want to surprise others, I want to surprise me. And, yeah, I do run into people throughout the years. And I would say now I've done it, a little bit more being in like the public eye, I guess you could say, with what I do, where, I've seen people say things, trolls, things like that online
Sure.
about, whatever they might have to say negative about what I do. And I can sit there and be sad about that and think, oh, I suck. This person didn't like my costume. They didn't like how I did, didn't think I was good enough. But I try to take that and harness it into like that fire of, oh, you think I suck? Well, let's see you do this, and take it to the next level the next time I come through.
And also, here comes the Mecha-Potent. Sit down. um, so you've already alluded to it at this point, but I do want to transition into talking about somebody who definitely does not doubt you. Your father, Papa Ferocity, let's call him. He has been an incredibly supportive person of your endeavors and is currently serving as the keeper of the dearly discarded. All of the costumes that can't
Yes.
currently be worn go to his storage spot at his house. You've also
Mhm.
said that growing up with him was how you learned to work with your hands and to love it. What would you do with him?
Like if I was going to like work on a costume with him or
No, I'm so sorry. Like, what would you do
oh
when you were younger? Like, what would
oh
you do
I
together
was like
working
I
with
thought
your
you were asking like
hands?
what costume would we make together because that's a really
Well,
fun
that could be a good
idea.
follow up question.
Yeah, I know. We should do that after this part. But yeah, for my dad, like growing up, my dad always was a tinkerer. He was always doing crazy projects in the garage, whether it was working on some random car or creating his own little like inventions, like some sort of weird boat that he would take on the river. And he also grew up with a family of carpenters, and he used to do carpentry until he became a police officer. And so he was always working on things around the house, doing custom woodwork, all sorts of things that I got to work with him on. But one of the things that I'm most fond of, was actually more recent. When we moved into our house, I don't know, maybe 15 years ago, it needed a lot of love. And my dad and I spent time together over about 6 months working through redoing like the entire kitchen, doing all these custom things. And I had all these crazy ideas on how I wanted to lay things out and make little special additions and, stuff that just was off plan. And we got to do that together side by side. And it really took me back to like the times when I was a kid and I would just love to either watch him doing what he was doing in the garage or in his workshop. He built a whole workshop in the backyard, putting things together, taking them apart, figuring out how they worked, and sitting there watching over his shoulder and having him let me help with, the things that were safe to let a kid help with. And so I think I just got that love of honestly, a lot of times just watching him and seeing what he got out of, feeling the completion of a project or moving along with doing something that people said I can't do. And I will say, you mentioned like, did people doubt you? I would say no, but they doubted my dad sometimes. I think he grew up with this kind of mentality of you think I can't do this? Well, I'll show you I can, you know? And so I saw him as that kind of inspiration for maybe that mentality, and I like it. And to this day, he's still out at his workshop, on his farm in retirement, and he's working on like a Jeep project right now. He's got a sawmill in his barn. So I still see this guy, running around at about 70 doing all these things. And it's really inspiring to me that he's not lost his curiosity or his want to just keep chasing, that next project and the new.
The apple doesn't fall from far from the tree, it would seem. Also, Rachel,
Yeah.
one of the things I want to pull out of that treasure trove that you just gave us was that you accomplished a full home renovation with your own father. That seems
Yeah.
like one of the greatest achievement, and you didn't kill each other towards the end of it. That's the most amazing
No,
accomplishment I've heard
actually,
of.
we were good. We were good throughout with that. My dad and I don't really like argue. He's just always been this like kind of even keel person in the background. And whenever I'm into a tizzy, because I'm the person that's always like anxiety driven, I call him and it's like an instant like Zen moment of talking to my dad and, him being kind of that steady presence. So he's the first person I call when I really just need somebody to listen and to be there for me and to be in my corner.
Unbelievably inspiring to hear. Shout out to all the parents out there who make life a little bit easier for your kids every single day. I aspire to be that kind of a parent to my son. I'll take a little page from Papa Ferocity. Um, Continuing on, based on your chosen hobbies, D&D, tabletop gaming, some people might be surprised by your career. You're a senior VP and senior manager of internal audits at US Bank. Perhaps not the most likely career for a cosplayer?
Yeah, it's not something that I think a lot of people even expected. Like when I was in high school, or even
Hmm.
my younger years, people always thought I think that I would go into the arts, whether that was visual or something else. And when I left school and I decided to go to college, I didn't quite know what I wanted to do. I'll be honest. I that's where that self-doubt comes from. I
Hmm.
think I talked myself out of going to maybe like an art school or doing something with the creative arts because I thought, well, I'm okay, but I'm not good enough.
Hmm.
And so, I ended up going out and doing accounting in college. I still don't know where that came from. I think it's because I started in marketing and then I realized it wasn't the creative environment I thought it would be from the type of school I went into. It was more like data elements. And I thought, well, if I'm going to be doing something that's, more data driven, maybe accounting, maybe something that, will get me to travel around the world or work in corporations and get exposed to different places, different things, and I can do my hobbies on the side. And so that's kind of where my career went. I won't sit here and tell you that my passion is auditing or accounting. It's not. It's definitely not. But what I will say about it is that it really did take me around the world. I spent my
Hmm.
20s traveling a lot with a couple of the companies that I worked at, going everywhere, including I was in Singapore for almost a month about 10 years ago. So I met so many people around the world. I got exposed to so many things that I don't regret it. I think it was an awesome way to springboard myself into the life that I have now. But I think being able to have this outlet with cosplay and with gaming and all these different things, I think part of that comes from that analytical mindset that you get from doing a job like that.
Hmm.
But I think also part of it is, just having kind of a steady and analytical career like that does afford me the ability to, have the time off I need and be able to do all these cool things with that.
I think a lot of us in this country specifically are stigmatized to think that our job has to fulfill everything for us. It has to give us a sense of purpose.
Yeah.
We have to be doing something that we absolutely love. Otherwise, it's a bit of a failure. And listening to you kind of retrospectively look back on your choices and see that all of the freedom that it affords you and obviously to see the proof in the pudding of the way you're able to show up for your hobbies and the things that you love nowadays, it kind of makes me want to rethink all of that.
Yeah, there was a time where I really struggled, and I thought, does this define who I am? Am I my job? And I think in my 20s, I kind of started to lean into that and think that it did. And it really was in the last 5 or 6 years or so that I started breaking out of that shell and saying to myself,
Mm.
you are not Rachel, the internal auditor. You are Rachel. You're everything that encompasses you, and that does not stifle your creativity and the things that you can do outside of work. And I think there was a long time where I was afraid in the last couple of years to admit to my network or the people that I work with what I do for hobbies, not necessarily the gaming, but maybe the cosplay. And yeah, I've run into people in my career space in general, not saying like specific company, but just around that, have frowned on it or thought it was immature or weird. But for every one of those, I've had like another 10 that come to me and say, "Hey, is this you? Or I heard this through somebody. This is pretty incredible. I think it's super cool." Um, and so, you can't define the person sitting next to you in the cubicle by what you see them, doing on their computer screen. There's a whole other human behind that person sitting there in the suit and tie. So, it's really led to a lot of cool friendships and getting to know people much broader, that I've worked with over the years.
And there's another facet of that I've heard you speak to, and that is the things that you might shy away from or feel shame about sharing are so cool if you act like they're cool when you're sharing to people,
Yeah.
right? Like it's it's just a fact that you are. It's so easy to be infected by passion and to be motivated by it, even if it's something somebody's telling you about something that you don't necessarily care about. If you love it and you make it apparent as it's coming as the words are coming out of your mouth, it's just something that transcends weirdness or awkwardness, so you're doing
Right.
it at the highest level. I'm sure that helps aid the fact that overcome that shame barrier.
Yeah, and it's funny, my dad says kind of the same thing, when we talk about my cosplay. Like, I think at first it took him a minute to understand it. He's not what I would call a nerdy guy. It's not the thing that he's into. But over time, over like the first year or so, I started doing it, and he would say to me, he's like, "You know why I love this for you?" And I said, "Why?" And he's like, "Because I see how you light up when you talk about it." He's like, "When we go and we sit and you have lunch and you talk about what you're making," he's like, I see the most excited version of my daughter I've ever seen. I see that little girl again, that was so excited to show me the things she just drew or just figured out. And he loves seeing that discovering me. I'm almost 39 years old. So it's like the idea of feeling kind of brand new again like that.
Mm.
And, finding that excitement, discovery, you're right. It's infectious. And, when I talk to people and when I see their excitement for their hobbies, it really does feed the conversation.
Especially for a parent who sends their child off into the big world to become a senior auditor and might be afraid that that childish joy is robbed from them forever. Um, that's a special
Yeah.
thing that you get to give back to your dad.
And we get to work on some things together now too. So he's not just storing stuff, maybe we can talk about it at some point later, but I've asked him for my next upcoming cosplay that I'm working on for Worlds, to take a look at some blueprints with me and some of the things I'm working on just for his perspective and opinion. And he's really excited to be a part of that. I can see him really light up, even though this isn't normally his thing. He's such a builder and a tinkerer. He's looking at it with me and just really getting geeked up about it and texting me and calling me and saying, "Hey, I have thought." So it's kind of a cool experience to get to bring this full circle this time. And, even though I'm designing and building it, having his input just makes it even more special.
I'm so happy for you and him for that thing that you get to share together. Um, let's turn now, Rachel, to another difficult subject. Your relationship to your body image has been a major plot point in not only your cosplay journey, but your life at large. You've been outspoken about how difficult this has been for you and how you've overcome it and put yourself out there. Was cosplay the thing that allowed you to confront your insecurities, or did you do some work outside of it that kind of put you in the right headspace to, then go forth and blossom, for a better lack of a better term?
Yeah, so it's interesting. I would say up until my 20s, I had this really bad personal mental image of what I look like or who I am, visually from the outside. And a lot of that came from my younger years, that was an area I got bullied in
Mm.
when I was younger in, grade school and high school. And it stopped in, college, thankfully. I think we all mature a little bit there. And so it took me
Some of
some time to
us.
work through that personally. Yeah, some of us. But you know what? We don't worry about those
Yeah.
people, or we say we don't. It's sometimes hard to ignore. But I will say this, cosplay didn't help me overcome it. It actually kind of brought it back. So
Mm.
I felt very confident, coming out of my 20s. And I started cosplaying about 3 years ago. So I was like 35 or 36 when I started for the first time, doing all this like higher level cosplay. And all of a sudden, it kind of thrust me into this spotlight that I hadn't really thought about when I made my first costume. I didn't go out there saying, "I'm going to make Dash. I hope a lot of people photograph me."
Yeah.
I don't know what I was thinking. Like, it's not that thought I wouldn't be photographed. I just figured nobody would care. Like, maybe one person would recognize it and want a picture. And then all of a sudden, there were pictures of me everywhere. And it brought back all those emotions from, when I was younger and, seeing myself in all these images. And suddenly I felt very self-conscious because I was in the public space. I was creating social media and I was suddenly like, this is like exploded for me. I didn't expect for people to like know my name so quickly or overnight. That was never the intention. I thought I'd be one and done, make a costume, and it was going to be a fun weekend. And, so over time, it started becoming like this self-fulfilling thing where I would doubt myself. And I have, seen a mean comment or two around, and that's fine. People are going to be weird, whatever. But I will say the way I, get over it is just remembering how many people really get to enjoy the things I'm bringing, how many people have been so positive for me that, overall and by and large, the community has made me feel very welcome. And any doubts I have about myself, I need to just get past them because, I'm not going to be able to accomplish what I do if I stay hidden behind a door. I can't get out there and make cool stuff if I'm worried about showing me.
Mm.
Yeah, I could hide behind costume characters or masked characters, for the next 20 years. I could just keep doing more Teklovas and Macropotens, with helmets. And that's fun sometimes because makeup takes forever. But, if I didn't get past that, I wouldn't have been able to do something like Pleiades. You know, she's very out there. She's very visual on herself. And, so that was like a big headspace I had to get through to do that character. And I'm really happy I did, because it doesn't matter even what I look like in the photographs. I had a great time and taking on the confidence of that character, because I'm sure Pleiades is pretty self-confident from what I can tell of her character. Taking that on myself really helps me to get past what's in my head sometimes in doubting myself or worrying that other people are thinking bad of me.
Hmm. When you first did Dash IE, you described, kind of not expecting a whole lot of attention from it, which almost it's alluding to something about you that I think is kind of a truism. Like, you are very comfortable jumping headfirst into the deep end, not really thinking about consequences, getting your hands dirty, and biting off more than you can chew. Right? So it begs the question, like, if the attention in the pictures weren't expected, what is the thing when you first set out to do cosplay? What was it that you were hoping to get out from it? What do you think you were chasing?
So for me, and I know I've answered this question a couple of times, but just to kind of come back on it, it was just a challenge that I loved the character. I had been making little crafts for her and, decking out my kit, with all the cold foils, making my own little crafts. And it kind of became this joke, a nice joke, not a mean joke in the community of like, Rachel is Dash, haha, that's so funny. You are Dash. Look at you. You're a redhead. You love Dash. You're playing Dash like every week, 3 times a week, And then when cosplay started becoming a thing in the FAB community, people are like, what would be cool is if you, cosplayed Dash. And I said, I don't know. And then it kind of got stuck in my head. And I think my expectation was just, I wanted to see if I could do it. I've always been a very curious person, and you kind of mentioned about the consequences and things like that. It's actually surprisingly the opposite for me. Up until the point, that really point in time, I was an overcautious person. I didn't like to put myself out there. I was shy. I, didn't do things without overthinking them for 5 months. And I don't know what snapped in me that said, I'm going to do this. You know what? I'm going to do it. And it's going to be funny. It'll be funny, right? We're just going to do it and see if we can. And if anybody doubts me, I'm going to prove them wrong, And I just decided to go for it and start making the costume. And I thought maybe at the time, like, I was just going to bring it to a random event. And I think like we didn't even have the contest announced by then, because it was like 2022,
Oh,
like
wow.
January, when I started thinking about making that. So we didn't even
Interesting.
have contests or tailors. So I just thought, I'm going to make this and bring it to a local event, and it'll be funny, and I'll never take it anywhere else. And then they announced the contest, and I was working on it, and I'm like, you know what? Let's take it to US Nationals. Um, so that's what I ended up doing. And I don't know what I expected. I just went into it thinking it'd be funny/fun to wear my Dash cosplay and play as Dash, because I was playing in Nationals. And, wouldn't that be funny for people to sit across from Dash playing Dash? And that's kind of where it went. And that whole weekend was honestly just wild to me. Absolutely wild.
A lot of hardcore athletes, like ultra runners, for example, derive a sort of transcendence through the discomfort of their sport. Some of them find that the pain is the only thing that provides relief from an otherwise racing and insecure mind. Do you think this phenomenon applies to cosplay for you? The truncated deadlines, the soldering burns, what have you?
Are you a psychologist in real life? Because I need to put you in touch with my therapist.
I'm not, but I have an amazing therapist,
uh,
and she kicks butt and makes me think about
honestly,
these things.
I feel like you're staring into my soul. I'm shook right now. But yeah, no, I am a person with a racing mind, and I am a person that's kind of going a mile a minute, and is always kind of almost up at like 2 in the morning, just thinking about wild and random things. So yeah, it actually does help calm my mind. It's almost like getting, like you were talking about runners. There's a
Yeah.
point of lock-in when you're working on something, and the pain is gain, and you're going through it, and it's like that hyper focus, which can be good and bad, but it takes you out of that space where everything else is bothering you in that moment because you know what? I'm focusing on holding a 600-degree soldering iron. And so I can't worry about maybe that email that came in earlier that I'm stressed about at work, or I can't worry about, what's going on in the state of the world. I mean, I still worry about that, but not when I'm focusing with my iron. And it really is cathartic to focus in and then just to see the growth. So one of the other big hobbies I think I've talked about in interviews in the past is that I used to, and up until recently, I just haven't had the time for it recently, do a ton of gardening and specifically like fruit and vegetable gardening. I had a big plot and I used to like farm my own food every summer. And it was the aspect of like seeing the growth that you brought to something and watching it, go through all its life cycles and phases. It's the same thing with the cosplay.
Mm.
Starting out and saying, "Oh God, I don't know how I'm going to do this, but I'm going to freaking do it." And stepping back at the end when you're on that like top of the mountain looking down and you're like, "Holy crap, I did it." Like, how did I get to this point? You had a vision and somehow you got there. And it's just, I don't know, it's an amazing feeling and it's an awesome process.
I'm kind of psychoanalyzing you in my random roundabout way, but I'm also a little bit psychoanalyzing something that I think is very true about the Flesh and Blood community at large. Because FAB is just one of those games. For me, I'm also somebody that has a racing mind. I'm much more comfortable when I'm in over my head than when I have nothing to do. Uh, FAB is just one of those games that requires 100% focus, right? And there is something so liberating about that. Like you said, I cannot focus on anything else. I can't worry about Garbage Island in the Pacific Ocean. I can't focus on that right now. I have to focus on this very thing in front of me. And that is just one of the aspects of FAB that derives such enjoyment from me. And I think a lot of people like us.
Yeah, I think, most hobbies are a form of escapism, but at least I believe in a positive way,
Mm.
in a good way that helps us to, really not just explore whatever we're learning, but something about ourselves. Like I said, I went into this not thinking that it would amount to anything bigger than just that one costume I made and that one time I would wear it. But it helped me rediscover something that I hadn't really explored when that's my like artistic abilities or creativity since I was in high school or maybe college. And I feel right now, like I said, almost 39 years old, more like 14-year-old Rachel than I have in a very, very long time, obviously. And that's exciting for me, being able to lock in like that and take all the other things that are, just racing in my mind or bothering me, put them to the side for a minute and focus on who am I at my core and what am I capable of and what do I want to do? And it's been its own form of therapy in and of itself, both the game and the cosplay.
Let's proceed now to Act Two, which I would like to call Queen of the Thread, or I guess of the foam in your case. Um, let's start off with an easy one, Rachel. In a lot of interviews, you talk about your origins in cosplay or costume play
Mhm.
as doing closet cosplay. Can you define that real
Sure.
quick for people who might not know that term, and also
Yeah.
tell us how it differs from what you do at a Fab cosplay contest?
So I don't know if that's an official term. I might have read it somewhere, or maybe I just came up with it in my head. I'm sure it's a term people have used before. But closet cosplay, what I mean when I say that is when I was younger, like in grade school, middle school, high school, I loved to go to thrift stores and buy old clothing, cheap clothing. I didn't have a ton of money, and go through the process of tearing it down and building it back up into something and making my own costumes. I don't think I hardly ever had a store-bought Halloween costume where we went to like a
Mm.
spirit Halloween or whatever we had at the time and bought something. Either my mom made me my costumes when I was little, or I started making my own as soon as I could. And so what I call closet cosplay is the process of just either grabbing stuff you have in your closet, buying store-made stuff, and either mixing it together or altering it to make your own version of whatever you're trying to make as a costume. So, what I do now and what I've done for the last 3 years, and when I say it was my first time doing non-closet cosplay, is really starting, crafting from literal scratch, pretty much. Foam, fabric, building a pattern, making something, without a guidebook. But there's nothing wrong with, something like closet cosplay. I did it for a long time and I still do it. There's still, I go to the Ren Fair, I make up my own outfits, I'll buy some things, I'll make some things. And I think it can be a really fun way for people to like dip their toes into the world of cosplay, costuming, etc., by being a good entry point, not just from cost, but also from being less intimidating than picking up a big old block of foam and saying I'm going to carve this into a sword. So that's what I mean when I say closet cosplay. It's not meant in a derision way. It's meant in kind of a fondness way of where I came from, where my roots are, and where I sometimes go back to.
Speaking of roots, you are known for bringing some of the highest concept and execution FAB cosplays to the community, but your relationship to Flesh and Blood started before your relationship to cosplay. As you go
Hmm.
deeper into your hobby within a hobby, do you find it puts strain on your involvement in the game?
Oh, 100%. So I mentioned that, my first cosplay that I did with Dash was at US Nats 2022.
Hmm.
And at the time, I was going to armories 3 times a week pretty consistently. I was practicing, pretty much as soon as there was Talishar. I was grinding, trying to, be a better player and be a serious player. And that I think I stayed kind of in the habit of until about the following year, summer of 2023, because I also did US Nationals at Vegas that year. But once cosplay really started taking off and like things started happening, like LSS giving me spoilers, taking me to shows, um, that's when things started changing because cosplay takes a lot of time.
Hmm.
Most of my costumes are in the 300-hour-ish range to build, and I'm trying to build 5 to 7 costumes a year usually, and that's going to take up a lot of your free time out of work. But what I will say is that although I don't, lean towards the heavily competitive side of Flesh and Blood anymore, I think it's also made me appreciate the other side of it, which is I still get to play, but I'm playing more things like side events. When I go
Hmm.
to these big events, I'm a side event queen, I joke all the time. And I really enjoy things like Blitz or Commoner or now, Project Blue into Silver, um, the whole rainbow of projects, and Limited. And so I think it actually broadened my horizons a bit to exploring other heroes, other decks, fun ways of play. And, so it's not so much that I don't, it's like interrupted my relationship with Flesh and
Hmm.
Blood, but it's changed it, in how I experience it. And, I think I'm happy with where that's at, to be honest.
It sounds like you're starting to identify with your love of the thing for the love of the thing itself, rather than any result it might be able to give you. As a follow up, do you ever have the itch to just leave the costumes at home and just attend an event in hopes of playing as many games as possible, or is that all in your past
I do
now?
it all the time, actually. I do it all the time. So, I will say this, if there's a contest and if I'm going to that event, the costumes are coming with. Like there is going to be a costume. And part of that too is because they have condensed, if people don't out there don't know, the the costume contests have been condensed now to tier 4 events only, and sometimes U.S. nationals, I think, which is kind of a pseudo tier 4. So if I'm at like an event like that, there's not as many opportunities now for me to get to compete. So I will be bringing a costume. However, there are a lot of events like, let's just say, regular callings, battle hardens that I go to that I leave the costumes at home because even my most comfortable cosplays, like I would say my most comfortable is probably like Minerva or Findle's Fighting Spirit, they're still uncomfortable in their own way. Anytime you're sitting there with not real clothing on, you're gonna have bits and bobs poking you or fitting
Mm,
funny. It doesn't make for a very fun gameplay experience all the time. It can be fun. It's all what you bring in your mindset and what you're doing, and the people around me make it fun because they're excited to see it. But I do like the break sometimes because I am a side event grinder. I love racking up tickets like I'm at Chuck E. Cheese's. And, that's a little bit harder to do if I'm constantly like, picking the costume wedgie out, something like that,
dude. Also,
to
the
be blunt.
prices are way better at Fab events than they ever were at Chuck E. Cheese.
Yeah, exactly. They really are. So, and I just also like that I get to do this like with my husband too. So,
Mm,
he has been very supportive of my cosplay, but it does get in the way of our travel. Like, poor guy is helping lug all these cases through the airport. We get to the hotel, it looks like, a cosplay bomb went off. There's just stuff everywhere all weekend. And so I have to give him that break too, and that kindness that, hey, like every other event, I'm not going to bring cosplays to it. Like, let's just go enjoy it. And what we really enjoy is because he's a side event person too. He loves like the
Mm.
crazy formats or the weird. He's like, he loves commoner. So, we get to do that together. Like, we get to go to all these little events together. Sometimes we're sitting across the table, friendly fire, and we build tickets together to get like the big prizes. And, I got like a whole sheet of like macropotent at Osaka. So that's been a really fun thing for us to do together and to partner on. So I really do sometimes enjoy leaving the costumes at home, but I'll even bring them to casual events too. It really just kind of depends on how I'm feeling.
It wasn't just the game of Fab that inspired your first cosplay. It maybe would be more accurate to say that it was Dash, i.e., herself, that captured your imagination. Do you see yourself in her? It's clear that the community does, but do you?
Yeah, I really do. I think for me, I think what I could say is when I say I see myself in her, I see my idealized self in her.
Mm,
And what I see in her that I want to be, because they've always joked that when you make like a D&D character, it's always what you want to be, right? It's your
yeah.
idealized self, but there's always elements of you in it, no matter how hard you try to maybe not. And with Dash, I think the things that she has that are similar to me, is that curiosity, that spark, that want to know, the person that wants to, pick up the rock and see what's underneath it, see what they can create and what limits they can test. But I think what she has that I don't have, and I wish I did, and why, you know, embodying her made me so happy was the confidence that she has. Dash generally isn't afraid. If you read her stories and her lore, she's just so excited. She's a little
Mm.
manic pixie mechanologist and she just wants to explore and be free. And I think that, I see that in her and I'm like, wow, I wish I had that too. And when I play her and when I'm playing other, characters in Flesh and Blood, it's not just acting, how I act. You almost feel like you are the character when you're in that. And so I've always been a very shy person. I don't like to introduce myself. I was a person that was scared to go to events alone. But the minute I put on a cosplay, I developed a sense of confidence that I didn't know I even had inside of myself. And, to this day, when I go to an event without a cosplay, sometimes I feel a little like a shrinking violet, like I'm, just
Mm.
like hanging out against the wall. People know who I am. They come up to me, but I'm afraid to go up to other people. And I feel scared again. I have no reason to. This community is awesome. Um, but the minute I pop on a costume, I'm strutting my stuff. I'm queen of the catwalk. I'm so confident. You aren't going to scratch my confidence. So it's really interesting. It's like a suit of armor you put on, even if it isn't a suit of armor at the time.
Given her immediate influence on you, do you think you are where you are today if that first box that your husband brought home didn't have the Dash IE art on it?
I like to think I still would have picked it up. It had beautiful art and it looked interesting. And at the time, I was searching for like a new hobby or something to
Mm.
interest me. We were still, I think, coming out of the pandemic at that time, and I was bored. And we had been running like D&D campaigns at home, and I had been playing like video games and different things. But I don't know. I don't know. Maybe I still would have. Hard to say. But she definitely was, the packet that I picked up, and what captured my attention was seeing this adorable little gunslinger. And I can't say whether or not I would have still picked it up, but that's life, right? The whole butterfly effect thing. Just one little thing changes and your life goes a different direction. So I'm really glad that I did see her.
Thanks for dying on the vine, butterfly. Um, Rachel, I've noticed that your cosplays tend to be kind of centerpiece cards and characters from Flesh and Blood. Do you have any cosplay ideas that you want to do that are of like more minor components of the game? An example I'm thinking of is maybe like the two guys from Daily Grind or something like that.
um, so actually, I have done some obscure ones, and maybe that's why people don't remember them probably too, because I've worn some cosplays that people are like, is that a Fab cosplay? Like one of the things that I think of right away are like the mentors, Minerva and Hala
Uh huh.
Goldenhelm. Most people didn't know what they were. They weren't centerpiece cards, I would say, unless
Mm-hmm.
you were a warrior player. You'd know what they were. But even some of the warrior players were like, who is that again? And so, I do. some things that are like those secondary things like Findles as well, Findles Fighting Spirit. But if you're talking even more obscure, like there is one I want to do, but I don't know if I want to say it because it's been on my like to-do list forever. I'm just going to go ahead and say it. I'll say it. Nobody's ever heard this. You're going to get the scoop on this. There's something that has been on my list for a very long time, and I actually keep a little book of ideas, and it's Blade Runner.
Oh
I
yeah.
love that art, and I actually reached out to Federico like a year or so back, 2 years back. I don't even know. It's been a while. And I said, hey, sorry to bother you, but I would love an AP of this hero or adventurer, but, whatever she is. And I said, I would like, an AP of this. And he was kind of surprised, like, 'cause it's a more minor card, and I said, actually, I'm planning to do a cosplay at some point of it, but I just still haven't gotten to it. And he ended up not only, obviously I purchased an AP from him, but he also drew me like a sketch that he sent to me privately and said, like, here's more of the costume kind of thing if you want to make it from like the front,
Oh,
which was super
cool.
cool. So kind of made it up for me. And so it has actually been started. I started it almost a year and a half ago. I just haven't finished it just because so many things keep getting kind of in the way in a good way. And I really hope that I can come back to it in the next year. I actually was doing my schedule for next year. I always make this like list and schedule of projects for the upcoming year or the upcoming months kind of rotationally. And I know it's going to change because something new is going to come out. I'm going to
Of
see and be like,
course.
oh, I want to do that now.
Uh-oh, you
And
gotta go
that's
to
what keeps
Singapore
happening
and be
before Blade Runner.
Pleiades.
Yeah, exactly. Oh no. But yeah, that's I do have that rotating list, and she's been on there for a while. And I was looking at 26 like earlier today, and I'm like, I really need to find time to finish this costume. It's half finished in a drawer. Like, I really want to get this done because I just really like it. I don't know what it is that draws me in. I'm also a warrior player and I'm also a mechanologist player, so maybe it's the combination
It's got to
kind
be,
of
right?
the
I
two,
mean,
just in the visuals of that art.
yeah, I
Yeah,
can't think of
it's
any.
so cool.
It's so out of left field for Warrior, really.
Right? It's and I want to know more about it. I keep
Mhm.
saying like I want to know more about this character. Like, what is this? This is so cool. So, yeah, I've literally got so many things already designed. The pattern's already done. It's just I need to sit down and do it, and it just takes time. And one of these days I'll get to it, but hopefully within the next year.
So, my personal favorite Fab cosplay that I've ever seen was that person that brought arcane cussing to Osaka. I don't know if you saw that one walking around. That just
Yep.
tickled me like in ways I can't
Yeah.
even exclaim.
Yeah, I judged Osaka, so I got to see all that up close, and he was hilarious. He was also the person that did Art of War at Singapore. So
Oh,
he's
I didn't
got
get to see
quite the
that.
sense of humor on him. Yeah, no, you got to go look it up. I think there might even be maybe when we're done with this, I'll send
Yeah,
you
yeah.
the video link because I think somebody got his performance where like he went across the stage, was like throwing little army guys at people. It was pretty fun. It was pretty funny. He is so funny. Oh
I
man.
love those kind of chaotic interpretations. What can you take a minute and shout out maybe something like that you've seen a person from the community who's brought a concept that you thought was funny? I guess you kind of did with Art of War, or like maybe made you think.
Yeah, yeah. Actually, I'm gonna go all the way back to the beginning on
Send
this
it.
one. And I wish I could remember her name. I feel so bad. It was just a long time ago, but she did Frightmare at 2022 US Nationals when I was Dash IE, and it was just so wild that somebody would do this like three-headed evil horse, you know, and she was just working it. It was so like funny and cool, and she was very nice. I for the life of me can't remember her name, and I feel so bad. But yeah, Frightmare definitely was probably the wildest thing that I've seen. That was like the coolest out of a concept.
So speaking of things getting in the way, Rachel, you've very long since had an ambition to start a YouTube channel, which you have, but to add more cosplay content, time lapses, the like, and call it pour the mold. Um, but things have gotten in the
Yeah.
way. Clearly, I'm really sorry if I'm twisting the dagger here, but what has kept you from really getting going on that project?
Yeah. So for me, it's been a couple of things. I would say primarily a lot of stuff I'm doing is just sprinting, through
Mm,
these costumes, trying to get them done in a very short amount of time. And when you're trying to like show a process or a time lapse, there's a lot of setup. Like as running a show right now, the setup with cameras,
mhm.
lighting, all of that. And when you've got all this chaos, like if I were to turn off this filter and maybe it's been like going on and off since we've been talking, I don't know. You would see
No,
the
you're
chaos
safe. I
behind me
promise.
of just, oh, okay. Good. Good. But it is chaos. It is absolute chaos right now. I have literally spools of filament about to crush me falling over here. I've got a helmet sitting over here. There's foam everywhere. And so having to clean that all up to have a really clean filming spot, to sit down with all my prep, it adds a ton of time. Not just double the time, but probably like quadruple the
Mm.
time. And then, you're stopping to make sure your camera's fine. And then you got to sit and edit it. We know what goes into this. I mean, like with editing and video and sound. And it just really was kind of picking my lane and saying, I thought I could do this and I gave it a go. And I do have some, B-roll and things I've filmed. But when I sat down to look at it, I'm like, it's not cohesive enough to turn into a
Mm.
tutorial or an end to end. It is still my ambition to really lean into doing more video of the process of what I'm doing. But I don't know how much I'll get into like actual tutorials and things I want to do. And the reason I say that too is, do I want to do something so specific to Fab with cosplay on my channel? Maybe, maybe not. There's so many good channels out there just in general, that do a lot of cosplay content and teaching. What am I really adding out there, for that time? And maybe I will still do it someday or get to little mini tutorials, but maybe short form is where I need to start. And that's something I've been considering is like,
Mm.
instead of like sitting down and having this ambition like I do with my cosplays to start at the craziest stuff, maybe I need to do the opposite with that channel and do something like shorts, and little like quick tips or tricks if you want to get started in cosplay. Or here's a little thing I made, here was me going 20-second time lapse in my bracers. And I think that's where I need to start because it's just, I don't want it to detract from my creative process and my enjoyment of what we just talked about a little while earlier, in sinking in and immersing myself in what I'm doing. I don't want to be holding that hot iron and working on something and worried about, oh, is my camera focusing? And so I think that's what's really been holding me back is once I started trying to do it, I realized how much in the way of the process that it got for me, at least.
Mm. Flesh and Blood is definitely on the rise. Our community gets bigger and bigger. But even though that is the case, we are still very much a small part of the puzzle when it comes to the broader TCG world. Looking at you, Magic. Damn you. Um, and that being said, Fab Cosplay then is kind of a sub community of a niche card game. So does that make competition particularly fierce amongst Fab cosplayers?
Yeah, I'm assuming you're meaning like at the
At the
competitions
cosplay
itself.
competitions, yeah.
Yeah, I was about to say we're not like tracking each other down the street to have like like
Well, if you
dance
are, I
offs
would
and
also
singing
like to know
fights.
about that. Oh, that would be fun.
I mean, I want to know if we're having like some West Side Story type showdowns. I'm missing them. If so, I'm not getting invited and I'm very insulted. But um, the contest itself, I don't want to say it's fierce. I think the community and like for those that don't know, we have a Discord, like a cosplay Discord
Hmm.
that's out there. I can plug it at some point later in the discussion, but essentially like the community comes together in that Discord a lot, like the people that are already cosplaying in Fab, and they really do help each other out. They're always like showing like, here's what I'm working on right now, my work in progress. What do you guys think? Can I get some ideas, some tips, some tricks? And we're always sharing what we know, trying to help each other out with what we're working on. So I don't want to say it's fierce in that sense. Now, I mean, granted, is the prizing wanted? Are people excited? Do they want to get a
Hmm.
tailor? They're going to go out there and do their best at these competitions. But I don't feel it's like from an animosity perspective. It's more from a just like any other sport or something like that healthy competition perspective. Yeah, I really want this, but at the end of the day, there's so few of us that we should be friends. Like who
Hmm.
else are we going to talk about this cool niche sub niche cosplay with? Um, so I think when you see it like the end of a competition, or if you see people posting pictures after a competition, you're going to notice a theme of all of us hanging out before or after. They do like cosplay dinners after the competitions. I haven't gotten to really join them because I'm oftentimes like doing judging and stuff and having to,
Hmm.
go back and break down afterwards. But, um, I think that they really are a close knit community that even when they are competitive, they're still, buds. And we wouldn't want to let anything get in the way of that.
Throughout your tenure in the community, you've been given a lot of direct personal respect and trust by LSS. At this point, not only are you receiving some of the most sought after spoiler reveals, being invited to write articles on the FAB TCG webpage, but you're also being personally requested for guest appearances at prime international events by James White himself. What has it meant to you to receive that kind of a buy-in from LSS?
Everything. At the end of the day, even if I didn't have it, I'd still, I think, to be doing what I'm doing now to the level and effort that I'm doing it. But it really just, it's an emotional thing, honestly. Like I remember, the first time I got that first spoiler, which was the reality refractor. It's actually still sitting up on a shelf above my head right now. Hopefully, it doesn't fall on me because it's pretty high up. And I remember being just floored. I had only done 2 cosplays at that point. I had done Dash and the Nitro Mechanoid. And for them to reach out to me, I was like, whoa, 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 I'm not a content creator. You're reaching out to me. And, just feeling like this huge gratefulness for that recognition and really wanting to show them that they put their faith in the right person, so to speak, when they did that. And I remember making that prop and that costume in 3 days
Mm.
and turning that around with photos and a whole storyline because and everybody's like, you're crazy. And I said, well, no, I'm just so overwhelmed and, grateful. I want to make sure that I'm saying thank you back with what I'm doing. And I think that that's followed with every single spoiler I do. It's not just about, like I said, it's about telling a story. It's about bringing something to community, but it's also about saying thank you to, the friends I've made at LSS, the connections, the partnerships, and, just overall the trust that they put in me when they give me something like this, because there are tons of deserving content creators out there
Mm-hmm.
that put in, tons of work every single day to bring FAB to the community in whatever way they're doing it. And so for them to pick me is, it's still very, very humbling every time I get that, anytime they reach out to me, and I don't ever expect it. There was a while between when I had Dash Dio, and I think the next spoiler after that I got was Hunt. It's a pretty long gap between spoilers for me there
Mm-hmm.
before I kind of got back in again. And, at that point I didn't expect it because there's so many people and everybody, deserves to get a chance. But I've been back in now since Hunted. I've had Hunted, High Seas, and then most recently, I'm going to have one for Super Slam. I think I announced today that I have one that's going to come out on the 10th of September. And that's just so overwhelming for me. I still get emotional every time when I get it, even though I've had a handful now, because it still is like, I don't know why after all this time, but it's still, to me, it's still, I don't want to say surprising, but like I said, humbling, that they're still
Mm-hmm.
reaching out. And I know tomorrow, or the next time one comes out, maybe I won't be on that list. And that's okay, if I'm not. But for as long as they're willing to put faith in me to do these things, I'm going to keep rising to the challenge and the occasion and show them, I really appreciate it.
It helps as well that James himself is like unbelievably genuine in his gratitude when it comes to this kind of thing. I just my partner and I just had an opportunity to interact with him on behalf of AGE, and I was just struck by how genuine the guy is about how appreciative he is when people have this much passion and want to create something on behalf of his game. I'm sure it comes in droves back to you as well.
Yeah, absolutely. I remember when I was asked to do Dio, and I've told the story before, so we won't go into the whole thing of the story, but I was actually asked personally by James to do it. It wasn't
Mm-hmm.
like LSS said to somebody in the company, "Hey, go reach out to this cosplayer." I was talking to James at Baltimore the day after I was dressed up as the Nitro Mechanoid, and we were chit chatting, and he said, "Hey, I want to talk to you about something. Can I message you? In the next couple of weeks or month?" And I was like, "Oh, sure." And mind you, I had like met James twice at this point.
Mm-hmm.
I had only been cosplaying for like half a year, 2 costumes. I'm like, what does he want to talk to me about? And then, after my spoiler happened for the reality refractor, he messaged me. We chatted. He asked me to do Dio for them. And I'm like sitting here thinking in the back of my mind as we're talking, I cannot believe the creator of this game, the head of this company is reaching out and sitting down personally with me and spending time out of his very busy day to ask me to make a costume. Like, how crazy is that? But in a good way. And I just it really touched me. And, anytime I see him at events, he always stops. We always chat. We talk about the costumes. And I know how much he loves cosplay and supports the cosplay community. I see it because, and I'll let you guys kind of behind the scenes at an interaction I had at Singapore. So when I did Singapore, I did a 4-hour meet and greet on Friday with James and the community, where they got to come up and get a Pleiades playmat and meet with James and also take a picture with me and James.
Yeah.
And so at some point during that, James said, hey, Rachel, got a question for you, basically. He said, tomorrow, which had been Saturday at the cosplay contest, he's like, I feel so bad. I have something I need to do, some business like meetings, etc. And I'm going to have to miss the cosplay contest. And James never misses the cosplay contest. If he's there, he's front row center, supporting it. And he said, what should we do? Who else, who do we want to bring there? We want somebody from LSS to be there that they're going to be excited to see in the front row, to know that they're supported. And so he ended up suggesting, and we had Robbie and MJ and Sam Yang. And that's just incredible to me that he stopped his day, to talk to me and say, hey, what do you think? I want to make sure the cosplay community knows that, we love them, they're supported, and we're excited to see them and the efforts they bring out. And, bringing out the head of, the art team to sit in the front row, to cheer them on, to enjoy the show, really just shows how much that he cares about, all these things, including little old us, the cosplayers. And so, I know that they appreciate, they being the cosplayers, really appreciate looking down the front row and seeing those individuals or James at any given time, applauding. And I can tell that when he's sitting there in the front row, it isn't just him, sitting there and being a face of the company. He's really enjoying the show and getting into it.
Well, that is a perfect segue into Act 3 of our little program. This is a section that we tailor specifically to each of our guests. For you, Rachel, this one is going to be called the Cosplay Czar. In this section, we're going to ask Rachel to imagine a world where in all of her spare time, she agrees to take on the role of Cosplay Czar at LSS. In this imaginary world, she has a budget and complete agency over all things FAB cosplay. From the contests at events to the prizing, to cosplay's overall presence and impact on the game, the buck stops with Rachel. We'll give her a few areas of scope and see what she would do if she were given the green light to put her pedal to the metal. Threw a little pun in there for you because I know you love dad jokes.
Oh, yeah.
Number one, the contest. How to bring in a bigger and more engaged audience. How would you perhaps make the contest more equitable to cosplayers that want to be participating in FAB events as much as possible? Are there any adjustments you can think of to make?
So this is a real tough one. And first of all, you're speaking to me about my dream job. If Cosplay Czar existed for LSS, I would fly over to the other side of the world and wait at the front door with my resume and slam it on the glass.
Phil would get over there at some point.
Honestly, my dream job is just to work for LSS someday. I'll sweep their floors and I'll bring them coffees. I would just do that. Leave my career tomorrow just to work for them. But backing up here, if I were the Cosplay Czar, what would I do to make the contest, maybe more accessible? So that is a huge struggle, I know, for the OP team. I think they're doing at this point just about almost anything they can, because here's the difficulty. The cosplay contest at any given convention, not just Flesh and Blood, but like we're talking, a C2E2, SDCC, anything like that, Dragon Con. It's always going to be the headliner event on a Saturday around 4, 5, or 6 or 7. And Flesh and Blood, LSS, has been doing what they can to try and make it so that the contest occurs towards the end of the day, still at prime time, so that people can get out of the main event or whatever side events they're in to be able to come and watch it. So I don't know that there's a ton more they can do there, because the only options we have are to move it to other days, and there's still headlining events going on and people still haven't come in from out of town, or maybe they need to travel. So timing wise, I don't know that there's a whole lot more that can be done to, make it so that everybody can be there, because everybody's got different goals and wants, and not everybody is going to want to watch the cosplay contest. That's okay. Maybe they want to grind side events for those tickets for that big sheet, or, maybe they're in the main event. But I think what is important and what they've already done is making sure that the timing of the cosplay contest doesn't hard overlap the main event. And they're pretty good at that. I think for the most part on Saturday, by 7 o'clock, when the stage show actually occurs and people get to walk and do their performance and we all get to clap and cheer, most of your main event type things have already ended. I don't know how much later we can push the contest, because I can tell you as a cosplayer, it's a long day in
Yeah.
those sweaty costumes and those pokey costumes and whatever you're wearing. So I think timing wise, they've already done a lot of what they could do. Now, one thing I will say, if they are listening, and I know this would be really hard to execute, but one of the things the cosplayers we sometimes kind of are like, oh man, I wish that wasn't going on, is so you've got the scorekeepers making announcements, right?
Mm-hmm.
During the events, and it can be booming sometimes because they're trying to make announcements so people can hear. I don't know what the answer for that is, but sometimes it's rough when like they're making announcements over top of like when we're judging or performances. I think for the most part they've quieted down while we're doing performances, so I think somebody must have done something on the OP team in the background to be like, hey,
Mm.
shh, we're doing the performances for a half hour, so kudos to them. But sometimes it can be hard when we're doing judging and things like that, but there's not a lot you can do about that. It's a mixed purpose room. It's kind of hard unless we put in another room and then people can't walk by and cheer.
Yeah.
Um, it's really, really hard. Now, what I would say is, we're already trying to make it equitable. And I say we as if I'm not OP, but they do involve me in like, getting my opinion on things, providing feedback on these contests. And I will say, I think they've already done almost as much as they can do at this point. If they start to like try and move it later, it would be bad. You move it earlier, it's bad. I don't really know how much more can get people in the seats.
Okay, number 2, the prizing. Is Taylor enough of a prize for cosplayers, or would you try to support the cosplay contest in another way?
Well, soon to be Frankie, but I would say actually, I think it is an amazing prize. And I also like the addition of the fabrics, which have been a hit
Mm-hmm.
as far as prizing goes. I don't know that you could do a lot more tailors, because right now every contest has 4 tailors up for grabs, roughly, in case, unless we have like too little participation, like only 3 people show up, we're not going to have 4 tailors to give out. But ultimately, I think that the prizing is good. Maybe the categories could be a little different. I don't know if I'm stealing
Mm.
your next question here.
Proceed.
Hopefully not, but proceed. All right, let's go for it. So right now, the categories in the Flesh and Blood costume contest are a little bit different than what you would normally see at like what I would say a general convention would do. Kind of
Mm.
generally accepted worldwide, and not every convention is the same, so I won't say this is at every convention, but generally what you will see is that judging or contest categories and prizing is done by level. So you'll have novice, aka beginner, journeyman, mid-level, and you'll have a master's category, which is like pros, masters, just again very experienced type levels. And I would really love to see us get to a point in the future. Maybe our community needs to get a little bigger. Maybe that's what's holding us back a little bit on that. But I'd love to see us get to a point where we get to a more generalized set of entry categories like that for the 4 prizes that they give out. And the reason I say that is right now the prizing is distributed by categories that are based on like a theme. And those categories are accuracy, craftsmanship, and performance, with a 4th one for rookie, essentially somebody who's never won a
Mm.
Flesh and Blood contest or actually never top forward a Flesh and Blood contest. And the reason that, well, I think these categories are good, the ones we currently have, and they make sense in many aspects. What is a little bit difficult about those categories is, how do you judge something for accuracy without judging for craftsmanship? How do you judge for craftsmanship without accuracy? They're so
Mm.
intertwined. And I'll give an example here. If somebody shows up in a simple pants and shirt as like a side character, we're talking about these kind of funny side characters, etc. Um, how are we going to judge that for accuracy if maybe it's more accurate, but there's a really difficult costume that's slightly less accurate? Should the 5-hour costume win over the 500-hour costume? I
Mm.
don't know. Now, we as judges, we use our judgment, and we figure that out because there's subcategories and things like this that say how difficult is the costume. Did they add any creative elements? You know, did they stretch their skills, et cetera? So we try to take that into account. But I'd really love to see us eventually, maybe when the community is ready or we're big enough, get to a more standardized set of judging categories, because I think what happens now is, and I'll say this, it's in like somebody like me, it's in my best interest to keep the current categories as they are, because I can multiple prize. But is that what's right for a growing community and attracting people in? So
Mm.
right now, these categories as they stand with accuracy, craftsmanship, performance I can enter all three and I can prize in all three. So I can win a Taylor in accuracy, let's just say in theory, which I did at Vegas. And I can also top four the other two categories, which I did, which means I get a Taylor and I get a fabric and I get a fabric. Great for me, right? But is that great for newer people coming in? You know, feeling like all the prizes are going to maybe one person that's maybe in the more experienced category. And that's what worries me about these categories right now. I think they're good in theory and I think they're good in many scenarios. And I get it, you know, we want to have these different um, categories and things people can lean into in what they want to do. Maybe somebody really is more into performance, maybe somebody's more into craftsmanship. But having this like overlapping prizing where you can win more than one prize, you cannot win more than one Taylor or Frankie. That's for sure. You can't like get one in each category, but you could still get all these other prizes. And then you have so many people walking away without something. And they do get a participation, and that's cool. But I'd love to see us get to more of that leveling type category where it's like, hey, I can only get a prize in my level. I can only walk away with one thing, whether that's a Taylor, a fabric, a Frankie. And then I think what you would see is more people getting to walk away from the contest with something special. So if I were the czar, that's the direction I would go in personally.
Okay, so you totally did steal my next question because the next one was going to be
I'm
the
sorry.
judging, but that's okay. That's totally okay. I have a follow
Yeah,
up to this. Um, for people
sure.
that don't understand general cosplay delineations, like the levels that you described, how
Mm-hmm.
exactly do you fit people into each of those levels?
No, that's a great question. So usually there's two ways to fit. And when you look at like the World Cosplay Summit is like a big organization out there. That's like a general organization in cosplay over a lot of major competitions. The way that this is categorized is by two things. One, what you've won, and two, how long you've been doing it generally.
Mm,
So sometimes the question will be, have you ever won a major contest? Or if you've never prized in a major contest, you're usually automatically like a novice. But there's usually like a secondary portion of that. If you've been, let's say, cosplaying for over 2 years, you would move into journeyman. And I'm not saying that's the exact thing. I don't have the summit's
sure.
rules in front of me. I don't have other contest rules in front of me, but usually it's an either or. Like if you fit one of these, you've either been cosplaying more than 2 years or you've won a prize or a major prize at a competition, you move up to journeyman. And if you've done it more than once or you over 5 years, let's say, you move up to masters. And that's meant to, get to the point where we aren't having somebody that's like, let's say, cosplaying 10 years but never entered a competition who's clearly a master's, going in and like just completely blowing out the novice
Mm,
category. And what happens at pretty much every con I've ever been to or talked to people that have judged in them is the judges are experienced enough and are given the latitude to recategorize people. So, for example, if they're judging a group of novices in that category and clearly somebody is like, a light years ahead, and clearly is a master's, they have the latitude to say, you know what, I'm going to recategorize this person to masters because clearly are. And typically they're doing that because they know they're going to prize them. So
mm,
they're going to prize them in that category. So they're not taking a prize from people that are just starting out because that's demoralizing to people. You walk in and you look around and you expect to see other beginners and you're standing next to, the pool shark,
yeah.
standing next to you, the ringer. And, that feels bad. And we don't want that. We want people to be excited and joining competitions. So I try to apply, these principles of like judgment when I'm judging, and I've judged a few contests now. I'm actually going to judge Montreal coming up. Um, to exercise my educated judgment. I don't consider myself a master cosplayer. I've heard people call me that in the community, but if you look at me in the broader sense of cosplay outside of Flesh and Blood, I'm probably journeyman maybe at this
Mm,
point. But I try to do my best with the knowledge that I have and the skill sets that I have to apply judgment, fairly across the board, to take into account the difficulty of the costumes that I'm looking at, the efforts put in, the little details that people put in. I want them to be excited and I want them to really lean into telling me what they love about what they did. And I want to judge that fairly and let them know that we are appreciating their work, their efforts put in, and I want them to feel respected during the judging process. So I know I went outside of the frame of that question and kind of rambled on there, but that's how we categorize people is like by time on, prizing, and then just overall professional judgment, I guess you could call it.
number 4, the logistics. you've detailed your own harrowing adventures about lugging around your cosplay from event to event. Looking at you, Nitro Mechanoid, is there anything that could be done on LSS's end to make this process easier for cosplayers? And before you answer, I do want to shout out the cosplay handler, Deb, for all of the support that she offers. I did not know that there was a cosplay handler until I started researching this interview. I want to meet Deb so
Yeah.
badly.
Deb is okay. We're gonna like pause for a second to shout
Go.
out Deb. Deb is just an incredible ray of sunshine in the Flesh and Blood community. She's out of Colorado, and she comes to a lot of these events. Deb herself doesn't cosplay, but she has been just the like number one support for cosplayers at these events. She's always running around helping people fix stuff, bringing them snacks, making sure they're comfortable and okay. She's just the all around just, you know, just sunflower at these events, and she makes everybody smile that encounters her. And she's just such a cheerleader. And she goes around snapping tons of pictures of people, capturing video, and making sure that everybody gets their point in the spotlight and distributes those online so that they can see their hard work on film. So, Deb, you are an incredible person, and you're also a good friend to me. So, big hearts to you. Appreciate everything you do for us. So, but yes, we were talking about logistics. So, LSS actually has been reactive to this in the past year. One of the previous things that the community has really been asking for were things like changing rooms. And these are things that are actually pretty common in certain parts of the world for conventions, like Japan. It's pretty much expected at conventions or things where cosplay is encouraged or will be that you will have changing rooms because it's not considered very, culturally acceptable to be like on the train in your cosplay. So you'd go there and you change and you get ready there and then you go home in plain clothes. In the US, that's not as common, and most convention centers or things don't set up those. So it's not a common thing in like regular US conventions, much less gaming things, to have like changing rooms. But people were asking and saying, hey, I'm struggling. Like, it's so hard to get my costume on and like try to get to the facility, get through the elevator, all this. And then where do I store my stuff when I'm gaming? And LSS really listened. And I can't say it's a guarantee at every event because every event's different. But for the most part, shout out to Nico. Nico, a lot of people know or might recognize, runs a lot of like the OP things at all these events. He's part of the OP team. And, Nico has really taken charge in making sure that the cosplayers are having places for their things, places to change, maybe to put on makeup. So we really appreciate that, Nico, and what you've done to really take into account the needs of the community in doing that. So I would say they've made it a lot easier, as easy as it can be. Anybody that's silly enough like me to bring a Nitro Mechanoid knows what they're getting into. That's on us, short of providing us with personal, assistance, which nobody expects, and, it's not going to happen. I think they've done a lot with what they can do there.
Okay, the fifth and final category here, Rachel, the community and or how it interacts with itself.
So what would I like to see there? I think they already, and I know these answers are feeling like cop-outs now because I'm saying we're already doing a lot, but I think if you're talking about the cosplayer community, I think they're already doing what they can to bring each other up, to build a community on our own, which started years ago. And shout out to Lynette. I'll do another shout out here if anybody knows Lynette. Also goes by Fabled Hero NZ. She's out of New Zealand, and she's been like the cosplay godmom since day one, since before there even were contests. And she created like this community in the background, this Discord, this Facebook group where all these cosplayers gather and support each other. And I would just say, as the cosplay community, continue to support each other, but also continue to be welcoming and to outreach to people that want to get into it but don't know where to start. I get a lot of like DMs and questions from people online saying, hey, is it okay if I reach out to you? Or they approach me at events and tell me that, they've never cosplayed before. How do they get into it? Where can they start? And I love talking to people about that. My DMs are always open to people that are respectful and kind and want to get involved in the community. I'm happy to give you some pointers on where to start when you don't know where to start. For the general community, I would say that, they've been incredibly supportive and really just seem to really be engaged with the cosplayers and wanting to interact with them at these events, support them, and overall been very respectful. One of the things in like the general convention community that can be a concern is people's behavior with cosplayers outside. I'm not talking Flesh and Blood. I'm talking just general, anime conventions, things like that. You get people that might get handsy with the cosplayers, rude, touching the clothing, taking pictures without asking permission. But we've really not had any of that here. So I would just say, do keep doing what you're doing, community. But I'll give you the general like big three, which is ask before you take a picture. I know we're there and we probably want our pictures taken. Don't mind our pictures being taken, but always ask before you take a picture. It's just respectful. Give us a second to adjust our costumes or put the sandwich down that we're eating. I guess that brings me to my second point. If somebody is playing a game or around or eating a sandwich or looks like they're struggling with something on their costume, maybe not the best time to ask them for a picture. Give them a second, give them a breather, and approach them later if you can. And then third, if you see anybody being rude or mean to a cosplayer or really just being a jerk, in general to anybody in the community, not just cosplayers, report that. Make sure that, that's being dealt with. That's what the staff are there for. See something, say something, that sort of thing. Because sometimes, if a person's shy or uncomfortable, they might not report that themselves or feel like they can. So, if you do see that, help police that behavior by talking to the staff at the events.
Okay, Rachel, that about wraps up Act 3. If I were cosplaying James White right now, you would be hired.
I appreciate that. Appreciate it.
So that concludes our time together. Thank you so much for being here, Rachel, aka Max Ferocity. If the good people on the FAB internet land want to find more from you, if they want to get more Rachel, where can they go?
Well, I'm Max Ferocity on all platforms. I'm on X and Twitter, where I'm probably, or sorry, X is Twitter, X and Blue Sky, where those are the two places I'm probably most active and just chattering about whatever's on my mind. You did mention that I do have a YouTube. You can find it by Max Ferocity or Pour the Mold. There's not much new on there right now, but if I do make things like spoiler videos or if I do some crafting videos in the future, it's there as well. And I'm also Max Ferocity on Instagram. And if you're trying to reach out to me or find me because you got questions on cosplay, you can find me on Discord as Max Ferocity as well.
Cardboard and Beyond is a product of Arcane Games and Events. And if you want to know what's coming up next with us, we've got 2 more opens in the AGE Open series left for Season 3. Number 1 is going to be August 30th at Grave Troll Games. That's supporting AGE New England, followed shortly on September 6th back at Great Stories Comics and Games. Both of those are going to be New England Opens. And then all we have left is the 2 Players Championships. One for Los Angeles, one for New England. Stay tuned for that as the dates become available. And that's it for Cardboard and Beyond. We'll see you next time.